He was convinced he had saved a freezing puppy from a snowdrift. A year later, a SWAT team was barricading the local veterinary clinic because the dog he was raising wasn't a dog at all. It was one of South America's most dangerous predators. Sebastian is trekking through the Peruvian highlands when a dark shape breaks the endless white of the blizzard. At first, it looks like a rock or a discarded pack. Then it shivers. A tiny, black ball of fur is huddled in the snow, barely moving. Sebastian stops. He knows the rule of the wild, survival of the fittest, but this feels different. The creature is too small to survive another hour in this wind. He kneels down. His rough, weather-beaten hands cup the animal. It feels like a block of ice. Two small, dark eyes stare back at him. No barking, no growling, just a silent plea for warmth. "You're safe now," Sebastian whispers. He unzips his heavy parka, tucks the shivering creature against his chest to share his body heat, and continues the trek home. He is completely unaware that he is smuggling a wild beast into his home. Back at his isolated cabin, Sebastian works quickly. He wraps the creature in thick wool blankets near the fire. He offers a bowl of raw meat, but the animal turns its head away. Strange for a starving dog. Sebastian tries warm condensed milk and fruit instead. The animal eats it greedily, making soft, humming noises. By morning, the shivering stops. The little black ball of fluff is sleeping soundly on Sebastian's pillow. The bond is instant. He decides to keep him. He names him Zeus. The first few weeks are peaceful. Zeus is playful, clumsy, and affectionate. Sebastian takes a picture to show his friends in the village. "What a unique breed," they say. "Look at those ears." Sebastian looks closer at the photo. The ears aren't pointed like a husky or a shepherd. They are small, round, low on the head. But he shrugs it off. A mutt, he thinks. Just a unique mountain mix. Life settles into a routine. Zeus seems happy. But Sebastian starts noticing small things, strange things. Zeus doesn't chew on shoes. He shreds solid wood doors. He doesn't chase rabbits. He climbs the door frames. He scales the kitchen cabinets with claws that are too curved, too sharp for a dog. He sits on top of the refrigerator, watching Sebastian with an intelligence that feels different. "You're a strange climber, aren't you?" Sebastian laughs. Zeus just grunts, a deep, guttural sound that vibrates in Sebastian's chest. Months pass. Zeus grows. Fast. Really fast. In less than a year, the tiny fluff ball becomes a heavy, muscular shadow that dominates the cabin. He stands on his hind legs, towering over Sebastian. But Sebastian loves him. He ignores the signs. He ignores the danger. Until the day he takes Zeus to the vet for a checkup, and the doctor's face turns pale with fear. Subscribe to see how this unfolds and comment where you're watching from. I will love to say hello to you just to know how far our story is going. The wind screamed through the Andes, a piercing wail that would have sent any casual tourist scrambling for shelter. But Sebastian wasn't a tourist. He was a man who had come to the Peruvian highlands seeking silence, and the blizzard was just another conversation he didn't have to have. He lowered his head against the gale, his boots crunching rhythmically on the frozen trail, until a break in the endless white caught his eye. It looked like a shadow, a misplaced blot of ink on a blank page. Sebastian stopped, squinting through the driving snow. Most animals in these mountains knew better than to be exposed in a storm like this. He approached slowly, expecting a rock or a dropped hiking pack, but as he drew closer, the shadow moved. It shivered. It was a tiny, black ball of fur, half buried in a drift. The creature was motionless except for the violent trembling that shook its small frame. Sebastian dropped to his knees, his movements instinctive. He reached out, his hands, rough, weather-beaten, and cracked from the dry mountain air, gently scooping the animal up from the ice. It was lighter than he expected, fragile. The creature didn't fight him. It didn't even have the energy to whimper. It simply stared up at him with dark, bead-like eyes that held no fear, only a desperate, silent plea for warmth. Snow dusted its head like powdered sugar, clinging to the spiky black fur. "You're safe now," Sebastian whispered, his voice lost in the wind. He unzipped his heavy parka and tucked the freezing creature against his chest, buttoning the coat over both of them. He could feel the faint, rapid thrum of a heartbeat against his ribs. He turned back toward the cabin, walking faster now, driven by the sudden, fierce need to keep this small life from flickering out. Inside the cabin, the silence was a relief. Sebastian stirred the embers in the fireplace until flames licked up the chimney, casting a warm, orange glow across the room. He set the creature down on a thick wool blanket. Now that they were out of the storm, he assumed the little guy would be starving. He went to his pantry and grabbed a handful of dog kibble he kept for the strays that sometimes wandered up from the village. "Here you go, buddy," he said, placing the bowl on the floor. "Eat up." The creature sniffed the bowl and immediately turned its head away, letting out a soft, dismissive huff. Sebastian frowned. A starving puppy refusing meat? That didn't make sense. He tried offering a piece of dry jerky, but the animal ignored it, nosing instead at a tin of sweetened condensed milk Sebastian had left on the table for his coffee. Curious, Sebastian poured a little of the thick, sweet milk into a saucer and sliced up a bruised pear he had been saving. The reaction was instant. The creature scrambled toward the saucer, lapping up the milk with a frantic intensity, making low, humming noises of delight as it devoured the fruit. Sebastian watched, bewildered. He had never seen a dog ignore steak for sugar, but he was too relieved to care. The little guy was eating. He was going to live. As the weeks passed, the blizzard faded into memory, but the mystery of the puppy, whom Sebastian named Zeus, only deepened. Zeus grew at an alarming rate. He wasn't just getting taller, he was getting dense. When Sebastian picked him up, he felt like a sack of wet sand, solid and heavy. One evening, while Zeus was napping by the fire, Sebastian sat on the floor next to him, running a hand over the animal's thick, coarse coat. He paused at the head. He had grown up with German shepherds and huskies, dogs with ears that stood at attention. But Zeus's ears were different. They were small, round, and set low on the sides of his broad skull. Sebastian pulled out his phone, the signal weak this high up, and typed into the search bar, "Dog breeds with round ears." The results were unhelpful. Some French bulldogs, maybe a stray terrier mix, but nothing looked like the black, shaggy animal sleeping on his rug. "Must be a local breed," Sebastian muttered to himself, closing the browser. "Some kind of mountain shepherd mix." He wanted it to be true. He needed the companionship more than he wanted to admit, and so he pushed the doubt aside, rationalizing the odd anatomy as just a quirk of nature. But the quirks quickly turned into chaos. Sebastian returned from a supply run into the village one afternoon to find his front door standing open. Panic surged through him. Had he been robbed? He rushed inside, dropping his groceries, only to freeze in the entryway. The cabin hadn't been robbed. It had been dismantled. The heavy wooden door to the pantry had been ripped off its hinges, not chewed through, but pulled sheer off the frame with brute force. Splinters of wood littered the floor. Flour and rice dusted every surface like snow. "Zeus!" Sebastian yelled, his heart pounding. A low grunt answered him from above. Sebastian looked up. There, perched on top of the refrigerator, sat Zeus. He wasn't cowering. He was looking down at Sebastian with mild curiosity, a jar of strawberry jam held casually between his front paws. Sebastian stared, his brain struggling to process the physics of it. Dogs didn't climb refrigerators. Cats did, maybe, but Zeus was already 50 pounds of muscle. The claws gripping the top of the fridge were curved, thick, and non-retractable, perfect for gripping bark, or in this case, stainless steel. "Get down from there!" Sebastian commanded, his voice shaking slightly. Zeus let out a chuff, licked the last of the jam from his paw, and scrambled down the side of the fridge with a dexterity that was both impressive and terrifying. He trotted over to Sebastian and nudged his hand, looking for a head scratch. Sebastian sighed, looking at the wreckage of his kitchen. "You are the worst dog in the world," he said affectionately, scratching Zeus behind those strange, round ears. "But you're strong. I'll give you that." As winter turned to spring, Zeus's appearance began to shift again. The solid black fur on his face started to break. Faint, light beige markings began to emerge, tracing lines from his chest up to his neck and circling his eyes. At first, it looked like he had gotten into a bag of flour, but the markings didn't wipe off. They grew more distinct with every passing day, forming cream-colored rings around his dark eyes. It gave him an expressive, almost human look, like he was wearing a mask. Sebastian took a photo one morning as Zeus sat on the porch, basking in the sun. "Look at you," Sebastian said, admiring the unique pattern. "You're getting your war paint." He posted the picture online, captioning it, "My rescue boy growing into his handsome new coat." Comments started rolling in immediately. Most were the usual "ah" and "so cute," but a few people paused. They zoomed in on the photo. They looked at the cream-colored rings. They looked at the heavy snout. They looked at the claws visible on the wooden deck. The audience knew exactly what those markings meant. Those were the spectacles of the Andean bear, the Tremarctos ornatus. But Sebastian didn't read the comments that day. He just sat on his porch, drinking coffee, watching his dog chew on a thick log of firewood, completely unaware that the animal he was petting was one of the wildest souls in the Andes, and it was only a matter of time before nature came calling. The solitude Sebastian had once sought in the mountains soon became involuntary. The few friends who used to make the trek up to his cabin for coffee and stories stopped coming. They didn't say it outright, but Sebastian saw the way they eyed Zeus, nervously backing toward the door whenever the animal entered the room, flinching at the heavy thud of his paws on the floorboards. "He's just playing," Sebastian would insist, but even he had to admit the games were changing. Zeus was no longer the clumsy ball of fluff he had carried inside his jacket. He was now a titan of muscle and dense fur, standing 5 feet tall when he reared up on his hind legs. At 200 pounds, he was a force of nature that Sebastian was struggling to contain within 4 walls. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the peaks, Sebastian sat on the rug, exhausted. Zeus approached him, letting out a low, rumbling chuff that vibrated through the floor. He stood up on his hind legs, towering over the seated man, and wrapped his massive forelegs around Sebastian's shoulders in a clumsy embrace. It was a gesture of affection, a mimicry of the hug Sebastian had given him as a cub, but the weight was crushing. Sebastian grunted, patting the animal's thick ribs, trying to ignore the primal instinct in the back of his mind that whispered he was wrestling with something far more powerful than a pet. He was living with a creature that could crush him by accident, yet he loved him too much to let go. But love couldn't change biology, and the inevitable collision between the domestic world and the wild finally happened on a Tuesday. They were in the yard, engaging in their usual roughhousing. Sebastian held onto a thick rope toy, and Zeus tugged, his head shaking from side to side with playful growls. Suddenly, Zeus lunged forward, eager to readjust his grip. It wasn't an attack. There was no malice in his dark eyes, but his paw swung out with the speed of a striking cobra. Sebastian felt the impact before the pain. It felt like a hot iron rod being dragged across his forearm. He gasped, dropping the rope, and looked down. 3 parallel gashes had torn through his flannel shirt and into the flesh beneath, deep and jagged. Blood welled up instantly, soaking the fabric. Zeus froze. He seemed to sense the shift in the air, the scent of copper. He dropped to all fours, nudging Sebastian's hand with his wet nose, making a soft, apologetic whining sound. "It's okay, buddy." Sebastian winced, clutching his arm. "My fault. I got in the way." He stumbled into the bathroom to wrap the wound, his hand shaking. As he cleaned the blood, a cold realization hit him. The cuts were deep. They needed stitches. And despite how healthy Zeus looked, Sebastian had never actually gotten him vaccinated. He didn't think Zeus had rabies. The animal had never been bitten, but he couldn't take the risk. If he went to a hospital for stitches, they would ask about the animal. He needed to get Zeus checked first, just to be sure, to protect his boy from any accusations. He wrestled Zeus into the back of his old truck, a feat that required coaxing him with an entire jar of honey, and drove down the winding mountain roads toward the valley. The veterinary clinic was quiet when they arrived. Sebastian leashed Zeus with a heavy-duty chain he had bought at a hardware store, the only thing strong enough to hold him. As they walked through the front door, the receptionist looked up and stopped typing. Her eyes went wide. She didn't say a word, just pressed her back against her chair. "I need to see Gail," Sebastian said, trying to sound casual, though he was pale from blood loss. "My dog, he's a big boy. Just need a checkup and some shots." Moments later, the door to the exam room opened and Gail, the local vet, stepped out. He was a calm man, used to treating everything from nervous house cats to kick-happy mules. He adjusted his glasses, smiling politely. "Sebastian, long time no see. Let's take a look at—" Gail's voice died in his throat. He stepped into the room and froze. Zeus was sitting on the stainless steel examination table, looking uncomfortable. His massive black body took up the entire surface. His head swiveled toward the vet, the cream-colored spectacles around his eyes giving him an inquisitive, penetrating stare. Gail didn't move. He didn't breathe. His eyes traveled from the animal's broad, heavy snout down to the paws resting on the metal table. The claws were unmistakably visible, long, curved, non-retractable hooks designed for tearing into bark and hoisting hundreds of pounds of weight up a tree. "He's a rescue," Sebastian explained quickly, misinterpreting the vet's silence. "Found him in the snow. I know he looks a bit different. Maybe a mastiff mix? I think he needs a rabies shot." Gail backed away slowly, his hand fumbling behind him for the doorknob. His face was devoid of color. "Sebastian," he whispered, his voice trembling. Don't make any sudden movements." "What? Why?" I need to get a special sedative," Gail stammered. "Because of his size. Just stay here. Stay calm." Gail slipped out of the room and clicked the lock shut from the outside. Inside the room, Sebastian stroked Zeus's head, confused. "He's acting weird, huh, buddy?" Zeus just chucked and licked the dried blood on Sebastian's bandaged arm. In the hallway, Gail didn't go to the medicine cabinet. He went straight to the front desk, his hand shaking so hard he could barely dial the phone. He didn't call his assistant. He dialed the local police, and then the National Forestry and Wildlife Service. "This is Dr. Gale at the Valley Clinic," he hissed into the receiver. "I have a situation. You need to get here now. A man has brought a predator into my office. No, not a dog. It's a bear. A full-grown Indian bear." Minutes ticked by. In the exam room, Sebastian was growing impatient. He could hear sirens in the distance, getting louder. He frowned. "Must be an accident on the highway," he muttered to Zeus. But the sirens didn't pass. They stopped right outside. Blue and red lights flashed against the clinic window, illuminating Zeus's face in jagged bursts of color. Sebastian stood up, his heart hammering. What is going on? The door to the exam room burst open. But it wasn't Gale. It was a tactical team, weapons drawn but pointed low. Behind them stood a man in a vest emblazoned with the Wildlife Agency logo, holding a long tranquilizer rifle. Step away from the animal, the officer shouted. Don't shoot him! Sebastian screamed, throwing his body in front of Zeus. He's just a dog. He's my dog. Sebastian, please. A calm voice cut through the chaos. The man with the rifle lowered it slightly. It was Dr. Jose Garcia, the region's leading wildlife expert. He stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Zeus with a mixture of awe and sadness. Look at him, Sebastian. Really look at him. He's a mix. Sebastian sobbed, tears streaming down his face, his arms spread wide to shield his friend. He has round ears. He is Intramarctos ornatus, Dr. Garcia said gently. An Andean spectacled bear. He is a wild animal, Sebastian. He is a national treasure of Peru, and he is highly endangered. You have been raising one of the most powerful predators on this continent in your living room. Sebastian turned to look at Zeus. The bear was agitated now, sensing the tension. He let out a roar that shook the glass cabinets, a sound that was deep, guttural, and undeniably wild. It was the sound of the mountains, not the hearth. Sebastian's shoulders slumped. The denial shattered. He looked at the claws, the size, the eyes that held a depth no dog possessed. He saved me, Sebastian whispered. And you saved him, Dr. Garcia said softly. But you cannot keep him. If he stays with you, he will accidentally kill you, or someone else will kill him out of fear. If you love him, let us take him home. The goodbye was a blur of tears. Dr. Garcia administered the sedative, while Sebastian held Zeus's head, whispering the same words he had spoken in the snowstorm a year ago. You're safe now. You're safe. As the massive animal slumped into sleep, Sebastian pressed his forehead against the coarse black fur one last time. 6 months later, Sebastian stood at the edge of a vast bioreserve, miles away from his cabin. He leaned against the railing, watching through a pair of binoculars. Far in the distance, high up in the crotch of an ancient tree, a massive dark shape was stripping the leaves off a bromeliad. The bear looked powerful, majestic, and completely at peace. He wasn't squeezing into a kitchen or climbing a refrigerator. He was ruling his own kingdom. Sebastian lowered the binoculars. His arm had healed, leaving a jagged scar, a permanent reminder of the wild thing he had loved. He smiled, a sad but genuine smile, and turned to walk back to his truck. Good boy, Zeus, he whispered to the wind. Good boy.